Now,
on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It is 5:07 a.m. on News Talk 105.9 WMAL. Making sense of the news. A good Wednesday morning. It is Wednesday morning, right, Julie Gunlock?
It is.
It is Wednesday.
We continue to be confused.
These holiday weeks, we're confused by this. Hi, everybody. You're listening to O'Connor and Company. I am Andrew Langer in for Larry, alongside Julie Gunlock. Good morning, Julie.
Good morning.
Got lots to talk about today, and we've got some great guests. It is Wednesday, so we're talking with Cal Thomas in the next hour, a syndicated columnist. We're going to talk about the latest political news because there's an election on. I don't know if you're aware of this, but there is an election happening. We've got Reagan Reese, White House correspondent from the Daily Caller on the latest White House news, and her story on RFK Jr. trying to take his name off the ballot. And then Adam Gillette, the president of Accuracy in Media, on Columbia's protests on campus. There's all kinds of stuff going on there. And obviously, this is, for many of you, back to school week. I know for me, we're sort of out of that window. Actually, we're just out of that window. I got a kid in college, but a kid out of college and in the working world. And to me, it never ends. I mean, I'm talking to both my kids just about every day about things. But Julie, it's a lot to wrap your head around, isn't it? Having all high schoolers.
Yeah, this is my youngest starts high school today. So, and I will say, I think a lot of it's never the same day in the DC area. I know that Catholic schools start a little later. The public schools went back weeks ago. Some private schools go back even earlier. Some are starting today. So it's all over the place. But I think this really is the last first day. Again, some kids are already in school and have been in school for a while. But for me, it's a really important day because, again, my youngest starts high school today. And you know that phrase, blink and you missed it.
Oh, yeah.
I blinked because I look at my boys all, today. They're so tall, all taller than me, bigger than me. I can't push them around anymore. But having 3 high school students, it's a kind of a big deal. So I'm navigating some feelings this morning.
Sure.
I promise not to
listen,
burst into tears.
We went through this. There always is, and I've got good friends, really good friends, sort of wrapping her head around the fact that her oldest is a senior this year, and you start the whole college process.
Oh, exactly.
And all I can say is, right. I mean, because we went through this, and we went through this when our older one went off to college that first time, and that can be a little tough. And then when we became empty nesters, and you get home and you try to figure out, well, what am I gonna be doing with my life? How does this all work? Now, as we joke in our household about the constant movement towards having dinner at 4:30 in the afternoon, that's the other part of this here. But here's as I
well, and
say
you're
to you,
such a big. One quick thing. You're such a big cook.
Yeah.
And
Listen.
And a family cook to go from feeding teenagers and then they leave and it's just the two of you is difficult.
There's the flip side to that too, which is then when they come home, the transitioning back from cooking for 2 to cooking for 3, or cooking for 4, as we did for a little bit this past summer. I mean, that's a real switch for me, and sort of planning out these meals. Plus, my wife and I are not picky eaters at all. So, and not that my kids were particularly picky, but they have different things that either one won't eat. So with my wife and I do fish. I know we're not talking cooking, Heather, I promise you. But we had incorporated fish into our diet a couple of days a week. That went out the window, and I'm back to sort of the rotation of chicken, pork, and beef.
Yeah, I always tell because I'm cooking for 3 boys.
Yeah.
I can't even describe to you how difficult it is to keep food in this house. And
yes.
My food costs are through the roof. I mean, I don't know when I'll buy another pair of shoes.
So here's a funny story. So the older one comes home for a few months after college graduation, but before she started her job. And I'm doing the shopping. I still do all the shopping for all of us. But she says to me at one point, the great thing is that both drive so they can do shopping for themselves. But she comes home, she's like, Dad, you don't have any food in the house. All you have is ingredients. And I'm like, well, yes. I mean,
That's a
ingredients are
phrase
kind
I've
of food.
heard from
Yes.
millennials that you're an ingredient house or you're a food, and I'm definitely an ingredient house. I
Yes.
cook every night from raw ingredients, and I often don't use recipes. I just see what we have
Right.
and throw things together. I know you're a lot like that too, but I have told my husband that after the kids leave and are off to college, I'm going to have to be one of those women who cooks for a group of priests in a house
Oh,
because
sure.
I'm going to need to cook at these large meals. And so I always joke that it's gonna be sort of like a comedy show, like like a potty mouthed woman is cooking for a bunch
Right.
of priests. And then anyway, so because it is that will be difficult for me, but again, it's a big day. I know that a lot of our listeners, we have a lot of moms and dads out there that are listening that have been through this and are probably, for those with older kids are starting, when your youngest goes off to high school, you do start to think of that sort of those empty nest feelings. And
Right.
it's exciting. And, if you do have a great relationship with your kids and they're still talking to you and they're, they're an active part of your life, then it might not be so scary. But I think in general, it makes you worried for them, but also excited for them.
Here's what I always come back to, and here's my word of assurance at almost 5:15 on a Wednesday morning in September. It never ends. The parenting never ends, and so you go out there, and your kids are always going to be your kids. And you're going to have these relationships, and it changes, sure, but it's always changing over time, just in the same way that it changed from when they became, 4 or 5, when they went off to kindergarten the first time, and when they went off to middle school the first time. By the way, nothing ever as traumatic and horrible as dealing with kids in middle school. But, it's the point is that, if you have that good relationship and you work on that, then you're always going to go. I'm still asking. I'm 53. My dad is in his late 80s, and I'm still asking my dad for advice. And that doesn't change there. So just rest assured, the relationship will always be there. It will be different.
And that's another question is, I think it's funny. My youngest recently came to me and said, when I graduate from college, am I allowed to come home? And it just broke my heart a little because I thought, of course, but it is an interesting thing. You want them to launch, you want them to get go on to whatever they're doing, whether it's a trade school, whether it's starting their own business, whether it's going to college. You want them to sort of launch and do that. You don't want them to, sort of become sedentary in the basement. But you're right that this next phase is just as challenging, and in fact, you may have just as much of a role in your children's life as you did before.
Right.
But still, change is
right.
afoot.
Listen,
So.
Listen. If you foster that relationship with your kids, you won't be the dad in Harry Chapin's Cats in the Cradle. That's listen, to me that was always the standard.
We're starting off early strong with those pop culture references. There you go.
Listen, we got to do that because it gets to listen. I know our demographic. We'll continue in just a moment. But first, it's 5:15 a.m. WMAL traffic and weather every 10 minutes. First on the 5.
WMAL.
Making sense of the news.
Live.
From the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios.
Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
I don't know about you, but this was the standard, and I don't mean standard as in terms of songs, but I was a little kid and I knew this song and I knew what it meant when I was when I was growing up in the 70s. Julie, I know you're a little younger than I am there. But that's one of the questions the three of us, you, me, and Heather, we were talking about before the show, was this issue of the kids coming home after graduation, and also sort of how we were all pushed off on our own when we all came to D.C. the first time. I mean, I know, my parents were like, hey, lots of luck to you. This is good stuff. I don't even know. I don't think I ever considered an option of going home to New York and living at home in the suburbs. For me, it was coming to DC and doing my thing. But I think it's important to let kids know that they do have that possibility. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Julie, your mic's off.
Sorry. Yeah,
there
that
you
little
go.
button. I always forget about that little button.
I get it.
I've only been doing the show for 4 years. So, you were your parents in politics?
No.
And
No,
see, neither were mine. My mother yelled. The closest we got to my parents being in politics was my mother constantly yelling at Donahue.
Oh, that's funny.
And Crossfire. Remember, Crossfire was really big in the late 80s, and but it really informed me. And listening to my mom have these very conservative opinions and kind of yell back at the show and not just passively listen. And actually, that's how they raised us by, challenging us, talking to us about the issues, why they were
going to yell at the TV.
Yes, exactly.
Like
which I do today.
Yelling at people in the real world.
Today. Yeah. Even my kids are like, Mom.
They can't hear you.
Yes.
They can't hear you.
But you know what? I like you. They certainly didn't have any political connections, and so our executive producer Heather was also kind of saying the same thing. Right. You come to DC and you kind of. You make your own contacts, you network, kind of the old-fashioned way by actually talking to people, and it was tough, but it gives me some sympathy for kids who do launch on their own at the same time. The fact that my parents didn't help me probably motivated me more to do it, to work harder.
It's interesting. So my parents were policy people. My dad was in sort of how science informs public policy on the science side of it, which was really great. My mom was an epidemiologist, then got involved in education policy. So, I had sort of that, but it's funny because I was an international relations major in college. Listen, you talk about timing, and you were talking about timing with your family earlier about sort of everything sort of coming to a head at the same time. I was a Soviet studies major, and in the middle of my junior year, the Soviet Union disappeared. So, it kind of was like, okay, I've got this Russian degree. What am I going to do with it? But it's funny because I have a brother who's 8 years younger than I am, and I told him to come to D.C. after college. He was going to go elsewhere, and I'm like, no, come to D.C. And I'm like, I'm going to help you in the ways that I was not able to be helped. Help you with my connections and sort of put you in and sort of send you on a different path. Yeah. But and then I told my parents, I said, listen, there are two ways to do this, and I'm sure you both would agree with this, right? You come to D.C. You can either have the really interesting job that pays nothing, or you have the really boring job that will pay you a lot more. The interesting jobs are always better, but it means that you need to be subsidized a little bit more, and sort of made that case here. Plus, when we started out, there weren't things like the Leadership Institute, Job Bank, the Heritage Foundation job. I mean, the Heritage Foundation did it a little bit, but
no. Honestly, Andrew, do you know how I got my first internship? I went to the school library, and they had some sort of a book, I can't even remember, that listed the think tanks in Washington, D.C. And I wrote snail mail letters.
Wow.
With my resume attached. I was such a nerd. And
Who was your first job with?
National Center for Public Policy Research.
Oh, I had no idea you worked for the Ridenauers. Wow.
The late Amy Ridenauer.
Yes.
Yes. She was very good to me. She was very sweet. I was a very silly girl back then, and she was very, very nice to me. But that was my first internship. And that was just doing research and going to the Library of Congress. It was all very much a dream.
I worked for a law firm here in town and lucked into this real quick. I'll tell the story. I had done college radio, and because I had done college radio, and that was on my resume when I was working for this law firm, they said, hey, we've got this partner. He heads our environmental section. He's blind, and we need a backup reader, and eventually we're going to need a new reader when his reader goes off to law school. And that totally changed my life because he was a conservative guy involved in property rights.
And you're reading stuff that he wants to hear. And I'm reading
the law to him for 8 to 10 hours a day.
Wow.
And that was great stuff. Listen, we've got so much more to get to. It's 5:22. So, Julie, it's the first day of school. I mean, do you guys in your household, do you guys have any special traditions for the first day of school, like the first evening of school?
No, not really, but we do. I don't think this is so different. I do make sure to get a picture of them. And last year, I sort of was not able to, and so I was not there. And so my husband is in charge of that, and he will be in charge of it this year. And I lectured him the night.
I remember this.
Yes. I lectured him the night before. I was like, please, try to have a tree behind them, or try to have because the year before he's always taking there's a random traffic cone
or dumpster,
and so
garbage cans behind them.
Yeah, and there'll be a dumpster, and I'm like, could you just please try to put the picture in a nice area? And so last year he did take nice photos.
That's right.
But he made sure to get one right next to the dumpster,
yes.
like the kids leaning against the dumpster or trying to look like a fashion model in front of the dumpster. Very funny, very funny. All credit to my husband. But so that's the only real tradition that we have, which I again don't think is that interesting.
It is. Listen, well, our hearts go out to everybody who's doing the transition, because it is a tough transition from the summer schedule to the school schedule.
Yes.
Though there are the parents who are obviously breathing these sighs of relief now that they sort of have their daytimes back to an extent, a little bit more breathing room. But that's just it. So they're going to come home tonight. You're not going to cook a special meal for dinner. Now you just get back into it.
Yeah, we're just getting back into it. Honestly, It's the schedule is really difficult, and sports starts immediately.
Yeah.
So they are exhausted, and also my kids, they go to a pretty tough school. There's homework immediately. Yeah. So we'll just really get into that schedule. And did you do something really special? Sounds like you did the night before dinner. Or...
I something that this is now showing my age is that now I don't remember these simple mundane things. But here's the thing with I would usually that first week of school I would make sure that I would cook the kids' favorite things, just sort of make it sort of it's there. But we always had a weird once we sort of transition back into this and you're dealing with the school schedules and the sports schedules and all of that, that planning and prep work becomes so vitally important. So, for me, we were always I would cook Sunday and Monday night's dinner on Sunday night, and then, Monday night would do that dinner, and then Tuesday and Wednesday would be the leftovers from Sunday and Monday, and usually there would be something in there where we'd have to throw something together.
Pizza or
so that's the way that we would do it. Listen, we got all kinds of stuff coming up on the show today, just so you all know. We've got Cal Thomas joining us in the 6 a.m. hour. We got Reagan Reese joining us in the 7 a.m. hour. Adam Gillette from Accuracy and Media is joining us in the 8 a.m. hour. And then, listen, after the news, we're going to be talking about Kamala's economic plans, because, Julie, she's actually starting to roll some stuff out. We got to talk about the relative merits of giving a $50,000 tax credit to small business, just what that means. I'm Andrew Langer. She's Julie Gunlock. This is O'Connor and Company. It is 5:30 a.m.
WMAL FM, Woodbridge, Washington, a Cumulus media station.
Making sense of the news.
News Talk 105.9.
Now.
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
Well, it is 5:37 on News Talk 105.9 WMAL. Making sense of the news. Good Wednesday to one and all. Oh, man, I'm so excited to talk to Cal Thomas in the next hour, syndicated columnist Cal Thomas, about the latest political news, because there's a lot going on in the world. We've got Reagan Reese. She's the White House correspondent for the Daily Caller. We still have a White House. We still have a president, Julie Gunlock. I don't know if you're aware of this.
Not sure who that is.
I'm not sure who it is either. But, but she's got the story about the JFK Jr. Now remember, real quick, the Democrats were fighting to keep RFK Jr. Did I say JFK Jr.? Sorry, yes, John.
That's okay.
The long lamented John. RFK Jr., they wanted to keep him off the ballot for a long time. Now they want to keep him on the ballot. Yes, we're going to talk about this with Reagan Reese. And then we've got Adam Gillette from Accuracy and Media, president of Accuracy and Media, on what's going on college campuses. We got that happening here at home with what's going on at the University of Maryland. I'm Andrew Langer. This is, of course, O'Connor and Company. I'm in for Larry this week, alongside Julie Gunlock. Good morning, Julie.
Good morning, Andrew.
So, policy. We've been in a presidential campaign that has been short on policy. Kamala Harris going to finally roll out some additional economic policies today, and this is really interesting because I was a small business lobbyist, Julie. I don't know if you know that. I worked for the National Federation of Independent Business for a couple of years. And there are two approaches to helping small business in America. One, is to deal with the red tape and rules and regulations. And as our good friend of the Competitive Enterprise Institute, Wayne Cruz, says, you don't have to teach the grass how to grow. You just have to remove the rocks from the lawn. Or you get to the capital side of things, which is what the Democrats tend to focus on. Kamala Harris today is set to propose a handful of new benefits, and believe me, I'm sure that's what it's going to be, a handful of benefits to small business and entrepreneurs. The most important one, the biggest one being expanding a tax deduction for the costs associated with starting a small business up to $50,000. Right now, they can take a $5,000 deduction. She writes, this is one of my singular priorities is to invest and grow our small businesses. Here is, of course, the problem. They can offer up a tax credit, which, of course, is something you can't take until down the road for your business, while at the same time massively ratcheting up regulatory costs on these businesses. So, like everything else, it's going to cost these businesses far more money than they're going to get out of this, even a $50,000 tax credit.
Well, she says in her statement that they're also, along with this tax credit, they're going to be removing regulatory hurdles, yet does not give one example of what regulatory hurdle she will be getting rid of. And that is because she knows the argument is going to be just what you laid out. So
right.
They say that, but they're not going to remove anything. In fact, they're going to continue to make it more and more difficult to do business. And it's all going to be sort of Green New Deal, environmental reasons. Have you checked this box? Have you checked that box? So, it's yet again, it's pandering. It's pandering to the small business community.
Well, and that's the issue, right? It's the snow job that they get on this, where they promise these things. Plus, we all know, with the Democrats, it's always the bait and switch. We're going to do X, Y, and Z, and we're going to promise you that we're going to do this other thing, and then they never go around and do it. Let me just give the numbers here a little bit, because these are numbers that I ran. These are mine. So the Small Business Administration, the Office of Advocacy, 90% of what the SBA does is, I think, garbage. But the Office of Advocacy, I don't know if you're familiar with them, they're the only office within the federal government that is mandated to be allowed to challenge the regulatory decisions of other agencies. And they used to do, back before Obama destroyed the office, they would do these every 5 years. They would look at the cost per employee per year. And the cost used to be, $7,000, $7,700 per employee per year. We're now talking that the cost of federal regulations under Biden has grown from $19,000 per employee per year to $33,000. So if you're a small business with 10 employees, that's $330,000 in regulatory costs every year. Yeah, a $50,000 tax credit isn't going to cut it when you're faced with that. The math just doesn't work.
Oh, the math doesn't work for Kamala Harris. Just imagine that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Shocker. Shocker here. But yeah, that's where we are. Listen, we've got a lot more to get to. It is 5:42 a.m.
WMAL, making sense of world events, because those who don't know history are doomed to repeat it. Download the WMAL app to stream us for free.
Julie, you raised an interesting point in the last segment talking about the issue of red tape and Harris and the empty promises that they make. These startups, right, when they start up, the red tape that a lot of them face, obviously they face regulatory costs. I want to ask you about that. But a lot of it's the state and local stuff. I knew a guy here in D.C. who wanted to set up a business. He had a great idea for business. It wound up taking off. It took him 14 months to go from concept to opening. And the first 11 and a half months of it were because of D.C.'s red tape. That, Kamala Harris does nothing about that. But that's what we're talking about. But then also the other costs, the mandates that are out there, a lot of the work that I know you do deals with these other mandates and how they play into this. It's
not just that. It's also the nuisance lawsuits that increasingly businesses are facing from activists, many of them environmental activists, that are fueled by an administration that is friendly to them. They know that these nuisance lawsuits, oftentimes these judges are just woke enough to allow these lawsuits to proceed, and then you end up with, a ruling against Johnson & Johnson of like something like $80 billion, which is just absurd. And increasingly now, small businesses are facing these nuisance lawsuits, again, from environmental activists. So you combine all of the regulatory burden put on them by Democrats and plus the nuisance lawsuits. Thanks for the tax, right off there, Kamala. It's not going to help.
Well, it's funny you say that. Listen, I'm not a vain man. Anybody who looks at me and sees pictures of me knows that I'm not a vain man. But the reality is, like, there are products that I like. By the way, that's the other thing. This is why I can't endorse products, because products that I do like immediately go out of the way. I can't.
It's so funny, Andrew. You're so Gen X.
Yes.
Men openly talk about products now. Like younger men are like, oh, I use this kind of shampoo, and and proudly. So don't feel like you have to hide this, Andrew.
Nope. Men my age, we don't men don't shower. We don't talk about.
Nobody knew what kind of shampoo John Wayne used.
But the point is that I have not been able to get the shampoo that I like for months, and now of course I find out that it was discontinued because somebody sued my company. Yes, it was my cancer-causing shampoo. Maybe that should have tipped me off with the big the big skull and crossbones on the side of it. But that's just it, right? At the same time she's talking about these tax credits, the costs are going up, whether it's the inflationary costs or it's the regulatory costs or it's the
getting
tax
a product
costs themselves.
to the marketplace. The
100%.
transportation costs are just insane. But it's just corporate greed there, Andrew. Remember?
Right.
It's just corporate
That's
greed.
Exactly it. Oh, and at the same time, anyway, they're going in undermining intellectual property things. Got this piece here. I think it's from Fox News. The Harris economy will spike your taxes by $1,100 and make working class Americans suffer. And this is about the tax cut, or the 2017 tax cut. Here's what, my favorite part of that story about the 2017 tax cut was Peter Franchot in Maryland running the numbers and having to grudgingly concede that for like 85% of Maryland taxpayers, the Trump tax cuts were either going to produce no change, but for the vast majority of them would have produced a benefit there. She's going to let them expire. And this is just the Trump tax cut, $1,100. Our modeling suggests, and this is the folks writing this, that her proposal will cost nearly $1.2 trillion over the next decade. She simultaneously, this is the tax credit, called for expanding the credit even further, calling for a $6,000 check for families, another $100 billion expense. I mean, this is from the Foundation for Government Accountability, Michael Greibach writing for them. I mean, this is the backwards way that they look at economics, the Democrats, right, Julie?
Yeah, and again, they will cast this, they will spin this to be a benefit that they are looking out for small business owners. Small business owners, though, are, I think, the smartest voters. And they show up.
Right.
So they're not going to be fooled by this. They know exactly what this is. This is more pandering, empty promises and pandering from the Harris-Walz campaign. And it'll be interesting to hear Kamala actually talk about her economic proposals. Dana Bash, in that interview with her, barely talked to her about these things. And she's not skilled explaining herself. And I suspect will get tied up in the debates if she talks about this stuff, because small business owners, the backbone of America, are suffering, and these solutions aren't going to do anything to help them.
I think it's very simple and straightforward. You ask every small business owner, "Do you wash your collard greens in your bathtub?" And they're going to come back and they're going to be concerned about this. I mean, listen,
gross.
Yeah,
I thought we were done with that. Gross.
Oh, hey, by the way, I was reminded of this yesterday. There's a Seinfeld episode about that where Kramer is washing his vegetables in the shower, and he actually installs a disposal in the shower here.
I'm done with this. Gross
I'm sorry. Yes, I know. Enough of this economy. I want off here. I mean, that's just it. They're going to dribble these things out, and more to your point, Kamala's not going to have to defend this policy. No one's going to ask her the tough questions. There's going to be the breathless reporting on this, and they're going to put the onus on organizations like NFIB, to sort of push back, the National Federation of Independent Business, to push back on this and how dumb it is and how unhelpful it can be. Listen, small businesses need to have the red tape moved out of the way, and not just, obviously, local red tape, certainly, but when we're talking about federal red tape, it's both the paperwork that they do, the mandates they have to follow, and the capital expenditures that folks like Kamala Harris are pushing that sort of wipe away all of these expenses. It is 5:53 here on O'Connor and Company, WMAL.
John Legend here. How do I keep my protection against